do you think governments test nuclear weapons before they fire them? August 6th and 9th, 1945, one of the biggest events in the history of humanity took place. Two cities were almost wiped off the planet because of what was called the Little Boy and the Fat Man, the world's first deployed atomic bombs. These were the bombings that happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the atomic bombs that ended the Second World War, but also ended the lives of around 200,000 innocent people and finally made Japan surrender to the US. World War II might have ended, but the US wanted to make sure they will be prepared in case of another one. And since the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings were successful, they wanted to use more nuclear weapons against future enemies. You know, like the Soviets. But question is, how do you make sure that nuclear weapons work properly? Well, the same way you make sure with any other normal product, by testing them.
The atom bomb is here. It exists. We must look to the future.
This would mark the beginning of yet another big event in the history of mankind. The US military decided to test nuclear weapons. All they had to do was find the right place to do it. So they went to the Marshall Islands in the Central Pacific Ocean, a group of islands located between Hawaii and the Philippines. There they had one main target for the testing. It was this little island, a paradise called Bikini Atoll, home to 167 residents whose lives were about to change forever. This guy, Commodore Ben H. Wyatt, Marshall Islands military governor, went to Bikini Atoll to tell them that they have to temporarily leave. Emphasis on temporarily. And that testing the bombs was necessary to prevent future wars. Wyatt said it was for the good of mankind. He also promised them they would be able to return home in no time. The people of Bikini Atoll didn't give them any problems, no complaints whatsoever. Their king even said, "We will go believing that everything is in the hands of God."
That it was a call from God for the people of Bikini to sacrifice for the peace and security of the world.
The residents then left to another island while the US military started preparing. They set the first of many nuclear weapons to be tested, and they called it the Operation Crossroads. Take note that this was a series of tests, not just one explosion. And so then we arrive at July 1st, 1946. Everything was ready for the first bomb, called Test Able. 95 ships were positioned in the lagoon of Bikini Atoll, only to be set to explode. Inside these ships were over 5,000 animals, pigs, goats, and mice, so scientists could study the effects of radiation. And 42,000 people were also there to witness the explosion. This was like a show. Like a fireworks display for the US to say to Russia, beware, this is what we have, don't mess with us.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
But the show was a miss, because not only did they miss their target, the nuclear bomb landed almost directly above the Navy's data gathering equipment, sinking one of its instrument ships. And a signal that was meant to trigger many cameras was sent 10 seconds too late. Only 5 of the 95 ships sank, and most of the animals were killed. The test turned out to be a huge failure, but it was only just beginning. Like I said, this was a series of tests with many different nuclear weapons. Despite the negative effects, only 24 days later, another Test Baker, had to be done. So the US military learned their mistake, and this time they decided to experiment with a different approach. Instead of setting the bomb to explode on a water surface, they planned to explode the bomb 90 feet beneath the water surface of the lagoon, which they did. It became the first underwater test of a nuclear weapon.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire.
What they didn't anticipate, and that is just insane, is that this explosion would create a massive tsunami, a 94-foot high wave. So powerful, it lifted a 27,000-ton ship. Another failed test. The head chemist of the operations, Glenn T. Seaborg, for whatever reason, called Operation Crossroads the world's first nuclear disaster. But the tests didn't stop for the next 12 years, and it was one tragedy after another. And remember the residents whom they promised they'll be able to come back one day? Well, it never happened. March to May 1954 was the time for another series of tests. They called it the Operation Castle. 6 bombs were detonated, still in Bikini Atoll, in a matter of just 2 months. The heights of these blasts were much taller than the tallest mountain in the world, Mount Everest. Under Operation Castle, the first test was called Castle Bravo. It was 1,000 times more powerful than the bombs that destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the most interesting thing about the Castle Bravo was that the scientists miscalculated the bomb's power. It was more than twice bigger than they expected. Seriously, what the hell were they doing? First try, Test Able missed the target. Second try, Test Baker created a tsunami. And now this, Castle Bravo, miscalculated. It will make you realize how difficult it is to control the power of such destructive weapons. Within minutes of the detonation of Castle Bravo, the poor islanders living nearby experienced radiation sickness. They suffered itchiness, sore skin, vomiting, diarrhea, and fatigue. They starved. Every island was contaminated. They had tumors, including 20 out of the 29 children. There also were birth defects in women. It was total chaos. All in all, there were 23 nuclear weapons tested on this poor little beautiful island, Bikini Atoll. And sadly, up until now, Bikini Atoll remains uninhabitable. The poor residents never had the chance to go back to their home island. They became nomads, continuously transferring from one island to another to avoid the radioactivity caused by the nuclear weapon tests. The waters on the island, seafood, and even plants cannot be consumed because they're still contaminated. Most of the people still call themselves Bikinians despite the fact that they never lived on the island. But more than half of the 167 inhabitants of Bikini Atoll have passed away, and they only heard these stories from their elders. Especially this story of nuclear weapons that were meant to protect them, but in the end only caused destruction. Truth is, nuclear weapons should be banned, but unfortunately they will never be banned, because just like what these tests exposed, humans will always remain imperfect.